Welcome back, everyone, for another deep dive. Today, we're going to be tackling something that I think kind of sends shivers down the spines of even the most, seasoned deal makers.
Yeah.
And that is acquisition integration.
It's interesting, even Alan Smithee, he's our due diligence detective that we've talked about so much. He wants nothing to do with this phase. He's like, nope, that's a whole different beast.
Right.
I'm glad to stick to my pre-deal investigations.
Yeah, it is. It's where the rubber meets the road, and frankly, where a lot of these mergers and acquisitions just go completely off the rails. And, we talk a lot to executives, MBA students, folks that are really knee-deep in, the deal strategy and all that.
Yeah.
This is kind of a reality check on how crucial this integration piece is.
Yeah, and to connect this back to the bigger picture, we always talk about the statistic that most mergers fail to increase shareholder value.
Right.
That's a sobering thought, and a lot of it has to do with what happens after the handshake. The integration and how that value can be eroded in that process.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah.
What do you mean when you say it's not just about the price tag?
Yeah.
There are all these hidden costs that kind of pop up during the integration.
Yeah, the total cost of ownership is actually much higher than anybody anticipates.
Okay.
And to give you a tangible example of this, think about customer base erosion.
Okay.
So you could lose 25% of your customer base if you don't integrate correctly, and that's revenue.
Ouch. Yeah, that hurts.
Yeah.
And I bet losing key employees during that same time just adds fuel to the fire.
Absolutely. Think about the cost of replacing top talent.
Yeah.
I mean, you could be looking at 3-5x their salary in some cases to try and replace somebody, and that doesn't even factor in the loss of productivity and institutional knowledge.
So is this synergy that everybody chases during these M&A deals, is it kind of a myth?
Well, synergies are real, but achieving them is often where companies stumble. There's this tendency to overestimate the potential gains and underestimate the effort required to truly integrate different systems, processes, and of course, cultures.
It's a lot easier said than done, huh?
It is, and there was a Federal Trade Commission study that found that deals only achieve their stated financial objective 30 to 55% of the time.
Wow.
So that's a pretty
big wake-up call.
It is.
So what about, those poor employees that are, kind of caught in the middle of all of this? I mean, it must feel like they're on, like, a corporate roller coaster or something.
The human element is so often overlooked.
Right.
But it's one of the most critical aspects of M&A integration.
Okay.
These employees have seen it all before, right?
Yeah. Business
as usual, no major changes.
Yeah.
All those promises.
It's like saying you're going to go on a diet but still ordering dessert.
Yeah, exactly. And the reality is that mergers create uncertainty, and that uncertainty breeds anxiety. There is a study that showed employees anticipate a 50% drop in their productivity because of the stress and fear associated with the merger.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So how do you balance that need? You need to move quickly, you got to get things done.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you need to keep people, calm and informed.
Well, that's where the concept of speed over accuracy comes in.
Okay.
It might seem counterintuitive.
Right.
But sometimes moving quickly, even if it means making a few minor mistakes along the way, is better than getting bogged down in analysis paralysis.
Okay, so make a decision to go, even if it's not perfect.
Exactly. Uncertainty is the enemy of progress.
Okay.
Percy Barnovic, the former CEO of ABB, he said, "Why emphasize speed over precision? Because the costs of delay exceed the cost of mistakes."
I like that.
Yeah.
But all that speed can't come at the expense of people, right? Especially when you've got, these inevitable culture clashes.
And the cultural aspect of integration, it's often compared to that iceberg analogy. What you see on the surface, logos, dress codes, all that stuff, that's just the tip.
Right.
It's what lies beneath the surface, those deeply ingrained values and assumptions and belief that each company brings to the table.
Right.
That's where the real challenge lies.
If those clash, it's going to be a bumpy ride.
It can be, and you see these predictable stages of conflict emerge.
Like what?
Well, us versus them.
Right.
Superior versus inferior.
Right.
And it's human nature, but it can be incredibly destructive if not managed properly.
So how do you navigate those cultural minefields and at the same time make sure that, the key talent, those people that are essential to making this thing work, don't just jump ship?
Well, retention and re-recruitment become crucial.
Okay.
Mergers make people reevaluate their options,
Right.
so you have to actively win back your top performers. And it's not just about money at that point.
Re-recruitment. I like that term.
Yeah.
So you're basically saying you have to resell the company to the people that are already there.
You need a compelling vision for the future.
Right.
Clear roles.
Okay.
Opportunities for growth.
Okay.
And a culture where everyone feels included and respected.
Yeah, so creating that new sense of we that transcends those old divisions.
Yeah.
It's almost like setting the ground rules for a successful relationship.
Absolutely.
Where everybody knows what to expect and there are fewer surprises down the road.
Exactly. And to manage that cultural integration effectively, you really need a framework.
Okay.
And the first thing is to define that desired cultural end state.
Okay.
Think of it like a prenuptial agreement for this corporate marriage.
I like that.
You need to define up front how these two entities will coexist. And that might require some uncomfortable conversations.
Right.
But it's better to have them early on than to let things fester.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to get it out there.
Yeah. And then you focus on cross-cultural learning.
Okay.
Pace the merger with cultural sensitivity in mind. And drive everything towards that desired end state that you've already defined.
Gotcha. Okay, so you've got this framework, but I imagine there are different approaches to how this, plays out in the real world, right?
Yeah, there are actually 4 main models for cultural integration that we see.
Okay, what are they?
So you have preservation, absorption, best of both, and transformation.
And each one's got its own pluses and minuses.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the choice really depends on the specifics of the merger.
Yeah, the context is everything.
Okay, so let's break those down a little bit.
Sure.
First up, preservation. What does that actually look like when you're doing this?
So preservation focuses on maintaining the distinct cultures of the merging companies.
Okay.
This is often used when the acquired company has a very strong brand or unique processes or a highly specialized workforce that you want to protect.
So you're basically keeping the acquired company kind of as a separate entity, but under the umbrella of the parent company.
Yeah, you're trying to minimize disruption to their operations and their culture while still realizing the strategic benefits of having acquired them in the first place.
Right, it makes sense.
Yeah.
What about absorption? When would that be the right fit?
So absorption, or sometimes it's called assimilation, is when the acquired company is fully integrated into the acquirer's culture and operations.
So it's all about creating that unified culture and streamlining the operations.
Exactly. And this is more common when the acquirer has a very strong, well-defined culture that they want to extend to the acquired company.
Okay, so you've got preservation, you've got absorption.
Yep.
Now let's talk about best of both.
Yeah.
What's different about that one?
So best of both aims to combine the best aspects of both companies' cultures and operations.
It sounds hard.
It can be.
Sounds like it takes a lot of communication.
A lot of communication.
And a lot of cooperation to get that right.
It does. You need to identify shared values.
Right.
Use data-driven decision-making to figure out which practices and processes will be adopted by the new entity.
So you're really creating something new and improved out of the strengths of both.
Right.
That sounds ideal, but I bet it's tricky.
It is. You need a lot of trust and transparency to make it work.
Okay. And then lastly, we have transformation. When would you choose that approach?
So transformation is the most radical of the 4. It involves creating an entirely new culture an operational model for the merged entity.
So it's a complete
overhaul.
Yeah, and this is often used when the merging companies have very different cultures. Or when the industry is undergoing significant disruption and they need to completely reinvent themselves.
It's like, high risk, high reward.
Yeah, high risk, high reward.
You're really trying to create something that's better positioned for the future.
But it takes a lot of change management to pull that off.
Yeah, a lot of heavy lifting.
So we've explored these 4 models for cultural integration.
Yes.
But, regardless of which model a company chooses, it's clear that the people side of this equation is absolutely critical.
It's paramount. You can have the most brilliant strategic rationale for a merger.
Right.
But if you don't manage the human element effectively, it's very likely to fail.
Yeah. I mean, people are the heart of any organization.
Yeah.
So you need their buy-in.
Yep.
You need their talent. You need their commitment to make it work.
Absolutely.
It's not just about the numbers on a spreadsheet.
It's not just about the financials. You need the people to be on board. And that's why communication, transparency, and cultural sensitivity are so vital throughout this entire integration process.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about kind of, the practical aspects of managing integration.
Yeah.
Because it is a complex process. There are a lot of moving pieces.
A lot of moving parts.
So how do you approach this in a way that actually sets everybody up for success?
You have to think of it like a complex project. One that requires structure, processes, and tools.
Like building a house.
It is like building a house.
You need a blueprint. You need a skilled team.
Yeah.
You need the right tools to get the job done.
Exactly.
And in this case, you need a dedicated team to oversee it.
You do.
This is where the IMO comes in, the Integration Management Office.
Exactly. They're the ones that are driving the execution of the strategy.
So they're like the project managers of the integration.
They are. They manage priorities. They track progress. And keep everybody informed.
So more than just number crunchers.
Oh, yeah.
They've got a lot on their plate.
They do.
Okay. So we'll dig more into their role after the break.
Sounds good. So before the break, we were talking about the IMO.
Right. You were comparing it to like the central nervous system of this whole integration.
Yeah.
And we were kind of using that house building analogy.
Yeah.
So if they're the project managers, what does that actually look like, day to day?
Yeah.
What are some of the key functions?
So they're involved in everything from pre-close planning to that final handoff back to, business as usual once the merger is complete.
Right.
It's a long haul.
Yeah. Sounds like it.
It's a demanding role.
Yeah. So more than just number crunchers.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Financial tracking is important.
Okay.
But their responsibilities go way beyond that.
Like what?
So they set up the overall integration structure.
Okay.
They define role and responsibilities.
Okay.
They develop communication plans.
Okay.
Manage risks, and then track progress against all those key metrics that we outlined earlier.
So what kind of person thrives in that kind of environment?
You need someone who can lead, communicate clearly, problem solve like a pro, and is incredibly organized.
Got it.
Plus, they need to be adaptable because with integrations, there are always going to be curveballs.
Yeah, so someone who's not afraid of a little chaos.
Yeah.
And can think on their feet.
Exactly.
And it's not a one-person job, right?
No. The IMO leader needs a strong team with representatives from all the key areas of both businesses.
So you need folks that really understand the ins and outs of each department so they can collaborate effectively.
It's about making sure that the transition is as smooth as possible.
Because smooth transitions don't just happen, right?
They don't. And it's important to remember that integration is about so much more than just merging departments and systems. Right. We're talking about bringing together people from different backgrounds with different ways of working and potentially very different values and expectations.
And that brings us back to culture, which we touched on earlier.
Precisely. The IMO needs to be sensitive to those cultural differences.
And
work hard to create an environment where everyone feels respected and valued.
Yeah, so it's not just about the what of integration.
Yeah.
It's about the how.
Exactly.
With the human element again.
It is. A successful IMO finds that balance between the technical side of merging businesses and that human side of bringing people together.
Yeah.
It's a tough job, but it's an important one.
So we've established that a strong IMO is key. But what about the companies themselves?
Yeah.
What can they do, even before, the ink is dry on the deal to set everybody up for success?
That's a great question. I always stress being proactive. And that applies here too. Integration planning should start as early as possible, ideally during due diligence.
So don't wait till the papers are signed
to
start thinking about how you're going to bring these companies together.
Exactly. By considering integration early, you can spot potential red flags like cultural clashes or maybe major system incompatibilities.
Gotcha.
You can also start developing a preliminary roadmap for how the integration might work.
So it's like going on a first date, but you do your research beforehand.
Yeah.
You want to make sure there's a good chance of compatibility before you get in too deep.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
Compatibility is crucial.
Yeah.
You're essentially trying to figure out if these two companies can have a successful marriage.
And speaking of compatibility, let's talk more about culture.
Sure.
We touched on it before, but I think, this is the place to really dig in.
Yeah.
What are some of the most common cultural challenges that companies face during these integrations?
Oh, I mean, the possibilities for clashing are almost endless.
Right.
We see differences in communication styles cause huge problems.
Okay.
There can also be big differences in how decisions are made in leadership approaches, the levels of formality.
Right. Risk tolerance.
Right.
Yeah.
The list goes on.
It's like mixing oil and water sometimes.
It can be, yeah. And if those differences aren't addressed head on, they can lead to misunderstandings, conflicts, lower morale, and ultimately a failed integration.
Okay, so how do you prevent those cultural clashes from, torpedoing the whole merger?
Right.
How do you bridge the gap between two very different ways of doing things?
Well, first you have to acknowledge that the differences exist.
Right.
Sometimes companies try to pretend that those differences aren't a big deal.
Right.
Or that everyone will just naturally adapt to a new culture.
It's like the we're all one big happy family now mentality. Yeah, that rarely works in real life.
Really works.
Instead, be upfront about the potential for those cultural differences.
Yeah.
Create a space for people to talk honestly and openly.
Exactly.
Don't try to brush it under the rug.
Don't ignore it.
Yeah, get it out there.
Yeah.
So make it safe for people to voice their concerns.
Yeah. Share their perspectives.
Yeah.
And it's not just about talking.
No.
It's about really listening.
Take out listening.
Companies need to listen to what their employees are saying.
Yeah.
Understand their fears and anxieties.
Yeah.
And address them in a way that feels meaningful, not dismissive.
Exactly.
So empathy is key.
Empathy is key.
Put yourself in the shoes of the employees who are going through this massive transition.
Exactly.
And it's not a one-time conversation.
No.
This has to be consistent communication
Consistent
throughout the whole process.
Yeah, keep those lines of communication open.
Yeah, don't go radio silent on people.
Exactly. And be flexible.
Right.
Don't be afraid to adjust the plan as you go.
Right.
Integration is a dynamic process. And what works for one company ripe as a disaster for another.
So flexibility is key. Be willing to adapt, change course if things aren't working.
The ultimate goal is to create a new culture that incorporates the best of both companies.
Right.
While respecting the unique identities of each.
So finding that sweet spot where everybody feels like they belong, but they're also contributing to the success of this new entity.
Right.
And culture is more than just values and beliefs, right?
It is. It's about behaviors, too.
So what do you mean by that?
Well, it's one thing to talk about collaboration and respect, but it's another thing to actually live those values, to demonstrate them through your actions.
So walking the talk.
Walking the talk.
Don't just say it. Do it.
Exactly. Leaders need to set the tone by being collaborative, respectful, and transparent in their own interactions.
So lead by example.
Lead by example.
Show, don't tell.
Right. And it's not just about the leaders.
Right.
Everyone plays a role in shaping that new culture.
It's a collective effort.
It is.
Everyone's responsible.
Absolutely. It takes everyone working together to create a successful...
and sustainable integration.
So we've talked a lot about the communication, the culture, the leadership.
Yeah.
That kind of softer side of integration.
Right.
What about the systems and processes?
Yeah.
Those nuts and bolts that have to be brought together.
Right.
How do companies approach integrating things like IT infrastructure, financial systems, supply chains, all of those other crucial functions?
The nuts and bolts of integration. It's a critical piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And honestly, it can be very complex.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You're basically merging two separate organisms into a single seamless entity.
Yeah, you need a skilled surgeon to do that.
You do, yeah.
Or in this case, a team of integration experts who know what they're doing.
They need to have a deep understanding of both companies' systems, processes, and data.
Right.
And they need to be able to anticipate those potential problems and find solutions, all while working very quickly and efficiently.
Because any delays in integrating those key systems can have a ripple effect.
Huge ripple effect throughout the entire company.
It's high stakes, high pressure work.
It can be.
So it's worth the effort, even though it's complicated.
Absolutely. But it takes careful planning.
Okay.
Meticulous execution.
Okay.
And a willingness to adapt and adjust along the way.
So again, just like every other aspect of integration, you've got to be flexible and responsive to those unique challenges that inevitably come up.
That's right.
And one thing that's important to remember, systems integration isn't just about technology.
It's not. It's about people.
Okay, explain that.
So you can have the best IT system in the world.
Right.
But if your employees don't know how to use it or they're resistant to change,
then you're sus.
It's not going to be very effective.
The training and change management are critical.
Absolutely crucial. You need to make sure your employees understand the new systems.
Okay.
They're comfortable using them, and they see the value in making the switch.
So it's not just about implementing the tech.
Oh.
It's about getting people to adopt it and use it effectively.
You got to bring them along for the ride.
And that requires, a communication plan that's clear, consistent, engaging.
Engaging. You can't just send out a memo and expect everyone to be on board.
This keeps coming back to communication.
It does.
It really is the thread that runs through every aspect.
It's the glue that holds it all together.
Yeah.
Communication is how you build trust, manage expectations, and create that shared sense of purpose.
Right. And it's not one-size-fits-all communication, right?
No.
You've got to speak to different groups of stakeholders in different ways.
You have to tailor your communication to each audience.
Right. Employees are going to need to hear a different message.
For sure.
Than, your customers or your suppliers or your investors.
Yeah, different messages for different folks.
And you've got to be honest and transparent.
You do.
No corporate doublespeak.
No, people can see right through that.
It just erodes trust.
It does.
So be real.
Be real.
Be upfront.
Be upfront.
And be consistent.
Be consistent.
And it's okay to admit when you don't have all the answers.
It is. Yeah, nobody expects perfection.
Right.
During a merger.
It's much better to acknowledge the uncertainty than to pretend everything's fine when it's not.
Absolutely.
People appreciate the honesty.
They do.
Even if it means hearing some bad news.
It shows respect.
So we've covered a lot. We've talked about communication, culture systems integration, the IMO.
Right.
What else is critical to success?
Well, strong leadership is essential. Leaders set the tone for the integration. They articulate the vision. They make the tough decisions.
Right.
And they keep everyone motivated.
They're the captains of the ship, right?
They are.
Guiding it through those choppy waters.
They are. And they need to be visible and engaged throughout the process.
So no hiding out in the corner office?
No, they need to be out there talking to employees, listening to their concerns, providing reassurance. And it's a very hands-on role.
So what makes an effective leader during this kind of massive change?
Well, they need to be decisive.
Okay.
But also collaborative.
Okay, so that balance.
Yeah, I got to find that balance.
Right.
They need to be able to see the big picture, but also pay attention to the details.
Gotcha.
And maybe most importantly, they need to be adaptable, resilient, and genuinely people-oriented.
Yeah, sounds like they need to be a bit of a superhero.
Yeah, it's a tall order,
right?
But it's not impossible.
Okay, so we've talked about leadership.
Yep.
What about the role of employees?
Yeah.
How can they contribute to a successful integration?
Well, ultimately, the employees are the ones doing the work of integration. They're merging departments, adapting to new systems, and building that new culture.
So their buy-in and their participation are essential.
It's essential, Their feedback is invaluable. They're the ones on the front lines. Right. So they often have the best insights into what's working and what's not.
Companies need to create ways for employees to share that feedback.
Absolutely.
Make them feel heard.
Make them feel heard.
And then be responsive to that feedback.
Yeah.
Employees need to see that their voices are being heard.
Yeah.
Their contributions are valued.
Absolutely.
So create a culture of open communication where feedback is encouraged.
Exactly.
And then encourage employees to be proactive and engaged. Help them feel like they're part of the solution, not just part of the problem.
Exactly. When employees feel like they're part of something bigger than themselves, they're more likely to be motivated and committed to making that integration successful.
Okay, so we've covered, the importance of planning, the IMO's role, the challenges of cultural integration systems and process integration, leadership, employee engagement. I mean, it's a lot, right?
We only just scratched the surface.
Yeah, integration is a multifaceted process.
It is.
With so many moving parts. But hopefully we're giving our listeners, a solid understanding of some of the key principles and best practices.
I agree. Hopefully some real takeaways here that our listeners can apply to their own work.
So as we wrap up part 2 of this deep dive, let's leave our listeners with one final thought.
Integration is a journey, not a destination. It's a journey that requires careful planning effective execution, and a deep understanding of that human element.
It's also a journey that can be incredibly rewarding.
It can.
Both for the companies involved and for the people who are part of the process.
Absolutely. When it's done well, integration creates a stronger, more competitive, and more innovative organization.
And it can create opportunities for personal and professional growth as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
So embrace the challenge.
Okay.
Learn from the experts.
Right.
And be prepared to adapt.
Right.
And evolve along the way.
Great advice. And stay tuned for part 3, where we'll talk about how to actually measure the success of your integration efforts.
We'll get into the metrics and how to make sure you're on the right track.
And what steps you can take to ensure long-term value creation.
Absolutely.
So we've talked a lot about, all the things that go into acquisition integration, the potential pitfalls, the strategies. But how do you actually measure whether all that effort is paying off?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right.
I mean, you've poured all these resources, the time, the energy into bringing these two companies together.
Right.
Now you need to know if it's actually working.
Right. You don't just want to go through the motions.
Exactly. It's not enough to just check the box.
Right.
You need to track your progress and assess the outcomes.
So are we just talking about looking at the financials?
Well, that's part of it.
Okay.
Are profits up?
Right.
Is shareholder value increasing? Those are key indicators, but they don't tell the whole story.
Okay.
Remember, we've been talking about the human element.
Right.
And if your employees are miserable and your customers are jumping ship, the bottom line's going to reflect that eventually.
It's like that saying, happy employees, happy customers.
Exactly.
You can't have one without the other.
You need to be tracking things like employee retention, engagement, morale.
Okay.
How are people feeling about this new combined entity?
Right.
And on the customer side, customer satisfaction, customer retention.
Because losing those customers during a merger, that can be a huge
setback. It's like building a house on a foundation that's crumbling.
Exactly, yeah. So beyond those core metrics, what else are we looking at?
Well, you also need to consider the speed and efficiency of the integration process itself.
Okay. How do you measure that?
Are you hitting your deadlines?
Okay.
Are you staying on budget?
Okay.
And are you realizing those synergies that you anticipated?
Right. Those are all important
variables.
Measures of success.
Yes.
So it's really this holistic approach.
It is.
You're not just looking at one piece of the puzzle.
Nope.
You're looking at the financial performance, the operational efficiency, the human impact.
Absolutely. You want that 360-degree view of how the integration's going. That's how you spot problems early and identify areas for improvement.
And you're not just doing this once at the end, right?
No. Integration is dynamic. It's an ongoing process. You need to check in regularly, analyze your results, and make course corrections as needed.
So it's like this feedback loop.
There's a feedback loop.
You're constantly gathering data, measuring those key metrics, and using those insights to refine your approach.
Exactly. That's how you ensure long-term value creation.
So we've talked about what happens during integration, but what about after?
Right.
Is that the end of the story?
Not at all. Integration is just the beginning.
Okay.
The real work begins once those two companies are officially merged.
So the journey doesn't end with, a party and a press release. It's this ongoing process.
It is.
Of evolution and growth.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
I like that. And hopefully a successful one.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today, let's leave our listeners with some key takeaways.
Integration is as crucial as the acquisition itself. That's where the value is created or destroyed.
Don't underestimate the importance of planning, communication, cultural sensitivity.
Those are the foundations of a successful integration.
And view it as an ongoing journey.
It's a journey, not a destination.
Got it.
Be ready to adapt, evolve, and learn along the way.
Great advice. And for those of you embarking on your own integration journey, we wish you the best of luck.
It's challenging, but it can also be incredibly rewarding.
So approach it with a clear head, a collaborative spirit, and a focus on creating value.
Absolutely.
And on that note, we'll bring this deep dive to a close.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.